On this episode of Tell Me More, we talk about Dr. Wiles' sermon, but we also just catch up because we haven't been together in 3 weeks. So it's a good, fun episode, and we hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to this episode of Tell Me More. We're back in the studio. It's Monday morning, and it's the three of us. Wow. So mark this moment.
Wow.
It may not happen again for a while. So
I think by my count, we may have like 2 weeks of this.
Okay.
And then it's not going to happen.
Then we're off to the races in July.
A little bit of a break.
So I'd just say cherish it. Savor it.
While you can.
While you can. Yep. You never know.
But last week's podcast was very informative.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. Let's start with last week's podcast. Mm-hmm. Ryan, Brian, and Kurt.
Wow.
Hats off.
Yeah.
They were good.
They're awesome.
Yeah. I was
great dudes.
saying before we hit record that Brian has a great radio voice.
He does.
Well, I've heard Ryan on the podcast. Kurt, no surprise there. But I guess in that setting, I haven't heard Brian that much.
Yeah.
So, way to go. They were all really, really good.
Maybe Brian Sepulveda will make a reappearance in July.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Brian will have his own podcast. I'll tell you what. I'd listen to it. Actually, that sounds
Between
great.
Brian and Kurt, how many camps does that represent? We're not really sure.
They talked about it on the podcast, and I can't remember. I mean, it's some because Brian's been on staff for almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
But he was going to camp as a kid.
Yeah.
So you start Brian's clock back when he was like sixth grade, I think is what he said. That's the first time he went. So it's. I won't do the math for Brian, but Brian has been at Riverbend when Riverbend was like one cabin and a tent or something.
Consequently, he's now chair of their board. So yeah.
What a great kind of trajectory for him. So and Kurt, it seems from my POV, Kurt kind of built camp into what it is today.
He did. He did the youth camp. He kind of separated because when Kurt got here, we just did one camp. They all went together, children and youth.
Yeah.
And Kurt's the one that separated it so that children could do one and youth the other.
He talked about it. He said he was burdened because they kept having to turn kids away. And he just thought there's a better solution than just turning kids away, which I just love the spirit behind that. And just Kurt takes the Bible seriously. Everybody already knows that.
Wow.
What a joke.
He does?
Really?
Yeah, what a curveball to throw out in here. But to integrate that into camp work, I do think our camp takes that seriously as well.
Yep.
Like the spiritual formation part. You're
it's
not
really
just there to have fun with your youth group, although I think that's pretty much guaranteed. You're there to actually have a spiritually transformative time. And I think we can credit that to Kurt. So,
and speaking of taking the Bible seriously,
let's do it.
we went to the N.T. Wright Bible Conference last week.
The Bible so seriously last week.
About as seriously as you can take it, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all, we know N.T. Wright is smart.
Yeah.
I've listened to him lecture before, but this one, my gosh, that
so
brain.
good.
Okay, well, for those of us who did not listen to N.T. Wright last week, what are some takeaways?
We went to listen to N.T. Wright at South Main Baptist Church. Takeaways? I mean, there's themes. There's some. He taught.
I know it's going to come out later in a sermon series.
Okay, I'll tee it up and then D-Dub can say whatever. Here's the context. Truett Seminary has recruited N.T. Wright, who's a New Testament, one of the best New Testament scholars that is living, I would say.
Correct.
Maybe the best. Depending on, best is that's all relative, but he's
one
very.
of the most noted, sure.
Well-respected, and I think for good reason. I mean, he's earned it. He's British, and Truett has recruited him to do some summer intensives. This is the 5th one that they've done. And South Main has hosted them, at least 3 of those. And so that's Steve Wells in downtown Houston. And so, Dr. Wells, you've gone to at least the 3 in Houston.
And I went to.
Did you go to the one in Waco?
I did.
Okay.
Went to Galatians.
Okay. And then I've never been to one, which is kind of watched from afar, but Dr. Wells invited me to go with him this year. And they went Old Testament. So I don't know who came up with it. But they, Dr. Still, presumably, asked in Professor Wright to go through Isaiah 40 through 55, which some people would call second Isaiah. Dr. Wiles would just call Isaiah 40 through 55.
Like it's typically referred to in the New Testament. But go ahead.
N.T. Wright, just for the record, N.T. Wright calls it second Isaiah, so I'm not coming out of nowhere with it. But
Katy is not advocating some fringe interpretation of the Old Testament.
Right. This is what we learned at that very Truett Seminary. So just to be clear. But, and that's because some of the prophetic language is so specific that there's good reason to say that this may be written in that actual time period.
Right.
That's my big view of that. So 9 different teaching sessions, about an hour long each, that walked through Isaiah 40 through 55. So there's I teed it up. Now,
really
your question
good.
was takeaways.
Yeah, takeaways, themes.
I've got some. I mean, I don't know.
The arm of Yahweh.
Yeah, the emphasis on arm, which I just don't think about a lot. The first few did a great job. He just did a great job kind of parsing it out without saying it directly, just about political power and the temptations of political power, and how the gods of war and money, Mars and Mammon, have always been with us, and how to look at our world through that lens, that whatever gods were, he just talked a lot about idols, but used it in that language, which I think could obviously preach today very profoundly. So he just parses those things out really well. That's just the NT Wright way. And then as he got further into it, just talk about the arm of God, the compassion of God. That's a word I want to spend. He talked a lot about compassion and then justice. Justice versus justification. I thought that was an interesting. We are justified so that we can be justice bringers. And I thought, well, that's a whole preaching series in itself. And so just a lot that.
And the suffering servant.
Yeah. The mission of God.
Just how the mission of God's been lived out redemptively.
The God who has always loved his people and always will, mixed with a servant is coming. And then how those come together in Jesus is a really profound. So
really good.
Just really cool, really great. And he teaches in a way that you can kind of understand it. You feel like you can, even though you're like, I'm sure there's more. But he repeats refrains a lot like that, those two themes of like the God who always cared and is always going to be with his people, and this immersion of a servant that's going to save the people, and that somehow in Christ we get both.
Yeah.
I think that's very simple, but also very profound, and you could parse that out for the congregation in a very beautiful way. So obviously he's teeing up preachers like, hey, you want a 9-week sermon series? Here you go. Or you could do several sermons from each. So anyway,
really
obviously the question is, me to Dr. Wiles before we went, like, where's this going to show up at First Baptist Arlington? I would just say to be continued, and it will.
You'll see.
That much info, just like, like
it's going to come out.
If D-Dub is a sponge and soaked all that up, it's going to come out somewhere. There's no way it won't. So,
Well, I
really
will
fun.
definitely be
Yeah.
using it at Baylor
Yes, you're
in
teaching,
the fall.
preaching through Isaiah. Is that what the class is called?
Professor.
Proclamation.
Right.
through Isaiah, yeah.
Oh, no. Professor Wiles.
Wiles.
Yeah, right.
That'd be fun.
So, yeah.
And Luke, you were gone last week, also
was.
learning.
I was.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was at my doctoral cohort meeting in Chicago. So
Okay.
at Northern Seminary, and it was.
Did you meet the Pope? He's from Chicago.
I did not meet the Pope, but people are pumped.
Is there like merch?
I didn't see
Right.
much, but I did drive past White Sox Stadium.
Okay.
And so
Are they gonna rename
that's
it?
probably the closest I'm getting to the Vatican this year.
It's White Sox Stadium.
Now known as Leo XIV's favorite home.
Yes. He's going to lead a mass from there. Did you know that?
What? No, I didn't.
So people were talking in the area. People
that's a
lived in the
big
area. Like,
deal.
I
That's
managed
so
to get a
cool.
seat.
Yeah.
So he's leading a mass from White Sox Stadium, which so Chicago is.
I think
just
that's very cool. Very contextual.
thrilled.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
So what was your cohort, like what was the emphasis?
So this is, it was ethnographic research method. So how do you study a people, their beliefs, how culture is shaping them? So sociologists taught my course. So it was not a theology course this time. It was a sociology class taught by a man named Dr. Mark Mulder. He's at Calvin University. And so he's done a lot of work. He's an urban sociologist. This is kind of where he started. So researching urban environments, but then moved into sociology of religion. But just learning, how do you study people? How do you kind of figure out what they believe, what their culture is, how it's shaping them, how you observe that, study it. So research methodology for later. But it was good.
You're about to say, how did you find it? Was it?
It was
enjoyable?
good. It's very different than like anything we would have done at Truett in our master's program.
Yeah, which is good because you don't need another MDiv.
I don't need another MDiv. Yeah, I already have it. But it was really good. So got some stuff I got to work on now on the tail end.
I bet. Yeah.
It just keeps on trucking. So, but it was a great week.
You seem to like your cohort, which I think is
do.
very important.
I'm one of 2 Baptists, which is fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's nice to kind of have people from other denominational backgrounds. So there's some Nazarenes, Christian Missionary Alliance.
Cool. We're appreciating that more and more in
Yeah.
this last season, I think. Just the ecumenical or post-denominational
I don't know what we call it.
I don't either.
We're still Baptist.
I think we're naming it as we go.
I'm not sure.
No one's been here before, so we're
So in the
learning it.
D-Min program, you stay in the same cohort
I'm with the same people
That's how it works.
the whole time.
Good or bad, right?
So I'll see them again in January when
Is
we
there
have
one person that's like totally the thorn in the group? You can't name them, but
No
you can
comment.
think of it. Just imagine.
If we ask somebody else that, will they also say that or not? Do you know?
I think if they're wise, they'll say no comment.
I've been in cohorts.
No, it's a good group.
I've always heard if you can't name it, then you need to start thinking about
yeah,
yourself.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, every family's got one, and if you can't name it,
It's a good group. It's a lot. I mean, you spend a full week together in class every day. A lot of us, to save money, we've divided up and we share Airbnbs in the area. And so I go to class 8 to 5 with these people, and then I go back to an Airbnb with these people, and you go out to eat with these people because I'm mostly with people who don't live in the area.
right? That's your
So-
Well, the cohort that I'm going to be teaching is their very first. This is their first seminar.
Okay.
Oh, so they haven't. You're setting the tone. Whoa, how does
It's
that
kind of
feel?
scary, isn't it? Well,
It's not scary.
Rebecca
You're gonna do
Hayes
great.
will be setting the tone. So she's
Okay.
our Old Testament professor.
And
who will
this
be-
is meandering, and we'll get on track in a second. But you have just gotten to know Rebecca Hayes.
I have.
Well, I mean,
Katie's a big Rebecca Hayes fan.
I am.
Dr. Rebecca Hayes.
And I think I just call that to attention because we're Truett. We're Truett adjacent. We're Truett
We are.
loyalists.
support
Our
in
church
some ways.
supports Truett Seminary.
Financially.
And we love Truett, and it plays an important role, I think. But yeah, they've gotten a new Old Testament professor since we've been there. I think both have retired. Leiling Non and Dr. Reed have retired, I
Yes.
think. And so they've gotten Rebecca Hayes, who I've really enjoyed. That's just When I was preaching either Ecclesiastes or one of the weird Psalms that you gave me one of the past few years, I just emailed her because when I left Truett, the professor said, "Hey, we would love to hear from you. We would actually enjoy helping you figure out a text for your congregation way more than like grading this 101 paper for the millionth time. Turns out we actually enjoy that."
And she's an expert on the Psalms.
Well,
That's
I
her area of
did, and
expertise.
somehow I did know that. So I bet I was asking her about a
Can she
psalm.
preach?
She can preach.
She's quite capable, and I just
She would
emailed her
consider
about.
teaching her best gift. But anyway,
Yes, but she's very easy to be with. I think that's my. So I emailed her, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe, and said, "What is this psalm trying to say? And can you help me?" I also asked Dr. Tucker because I love Dr. Tucker. They both answered me really well. But it just started a small friendship with her, and so I popped into her office when we were at Truett with Rolf,
Yeah.
our Canadian friend,
well, she brags on you to me.
because of
She
our
just-
friendship.
she just-
I
yeah,
think we have a
she
mutual
thinks
respect.
very highly of you.
Well, it's nice when you find a like-minded person, and so I think we would have been we're the same age and kind of in similar. We have parallel lives.
She has small children.
I'd like to think we could be friends if we lived in the same town. So you'll spend an intensive week with her in a couple months.
Yeah, I know her husband Josh, but I'm just getting to know her.
Yeah,
Very
Josh
impressed with
is
her.
the associate pastor at First Baptist Waco, and he's a good guy too. And I've corresponded with him from afar. So
Yeah.
it's good to know good
So
people.
many good people in this world.
Let's just focus on that for a minute. Say it again, Luke.
There
Say
are.
it again.
There are so many good people in this
And there
world.
are some great fathers. Happy Father's Day.
Let's
Happy
turn to
Father's
that.
Day to
That
you too.
yesterday.
Let's turn to that.
What a sweet day we had.
It was a good day.
It's a good day.
I hope everybody got a donut. If you didn't, you did not do your churchly duty.
I ate not one but two donuts because
And
had enough.
hats off to dads, which was awesome.
great little photo booth, big photo booth.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch everyone assemble. Because you and I basically stay around the Welcome Home Center most of Sunday morning.
Yeah, yeah.
And so fun to watch everyone sit down and take a picture with their dad.
It was sweet, sweet day.
Can I ask you too, as fathers, what's your favorite part about being a dad?
Ooh.
Wow.
I don't even know where to start.
Do I need to narrow it?
I think there's just so much that comes with it. There's just it has helped me to understand God more deeply. Probably the biggest thing for me.
Well, that's
what I'd say.
the best answer.
I know. You want to follow it?
Sunday school answer. But I've had fun as a dad. I mean, I played with my
so
kids
fun.
and I coached them in sports. I mean, Hannah was an incredibly gifted athlete as a young girl. And I coached her basketball team, her softball team. And we had a lot of fun and just being a part of her life. She was an excellent gymnast. In fact, we were in Garland in those days, and the gymnastics center tried to convince us to let her move to Houston without us and become a part of the U.S. training center for gymnasts. The coach was a former All-American gymnast and a U.S. gymnastics judge, and he actually was on our staff at our church. And but we just weren't quite into it at that level, so we did not let her go. But it was fun to participate in it and watch her have fun at that. And that translated when we moved here into swimming and diving. She became a really good diver. And then Josiah, I coached his sports as well, and Josiah was just a great kid, and he was a good athlete. He was a football player, which was a little harder for me. I never coached football, not much. I coached it a little bit. But we went to, everything he played, and then he got into golf, and then that was a lot of fun. So I've just had fun with my kids, and then getting to shape them and teach them and love them. But I think for me, learning about the love of God as a father has probably been the biggest thing for me personally.
Well, what he said.
Right. But also, put it in your own words. Put it in your own words.
Just watching their personalities develop over time has been amazing. And I think you're starting to kind of see it.
Oh, it's the best. Yeah.
Now that you're in toddlerhood. But man, Evelyn's 8 now, Lucy's 5. And so just watching them turn into real people. I mean, they've always been real people.
But you're right. Yeah, you have like a friendship now with them.
And they have interests, and you get to kind of join with them in those and get to share your interests with them. And not that we're friends. I'm their dad.
There is a friendship,
there's
though,
a friendship
I think,
to
right?
it.
Yeah.
I think the way my parents described it when they were raising us is they were trying to raise the kind of people they could be friends with as adults. And so thinking through that lens and trying to raise children that way, and seeing those seeds now, and then just imagining what it can become. So, and I love, having girls is so great.
I can't say.
I got some really sweet hugs from them Sunday morning.
Oh, good.
I was coming in the sanctuary, and they were in the back sitting with Kelsey. They were actually standing worshiping, and Evelyn had Lucy kind of embraced. And when they both saw me, I kind of waved at them, and they both just reached out, and I got the sweet little hug on my way in.
They're great girls.
Yeah.
Can I switch gears and then we can talk about the Bible?
Sure.
One, y'all are great dads. I think we are in an era of great fatherhood. Christianity Today shared something on their Instagram.
Yeah, I think millennial dads on average are spending like 40% more time with their kids than previous generations.
We really
crazy.
are. We're just the men around me, for the most part, are just terrific dads, and you just have to think that's just great for society as a whole. Like,
Amen.
may everyone.
I mean,
have
I
a
looked
good
at
dad.
like the video of Josh Dak and Jeff Evans.
Oh, man.
Just talking about parenting and
So good.
watching both of those guys parent, and so many other people in our church parent.
And for those listening, if you want to be a good parent, we want to help you.
That's right.
And we don't mean perfect. My gosh, that's not the goal. Well, I mean, in the Sermon on the Mount, it is, but you know what I mean. Like, ultimately, it is. But really, the goal is just to be. The intent is to just be good for your kids, and we want to help you do that more than a lot of things. So, no, what I was going to say, small story from my POV yesterday. We took the boys down the hallway at the end of church to take the Father's Day picture with Ryan, and I sat in it too. That was interesting to see. Are the moms in it or are they not? I chose to be. It's my family too.
It is.
But
I took a photo of y'all, sent it to your husband.
yes, it was sweet. But we have, and then Teddy and Kyle's kids, Kyle and Chelsea's kids, Teddy and Lucy, they know our boys. They've been at our house some. And I'm pretty sure that Jack Hodges has a little crush on Chelsea Judkins, which is so cute.
On Chelsea or Lucy?
Oh, sorry, Lucy. Gosh.
Okay.
Lucy.
Yes, on Lucy. And so Lucy was giving hugs to my boys, but Jack kind of missed his moment. He was just doing something else. And he was like, basically like, I want to hug Lucy. I was like, okay, well, let's go find Lucy. So he traipses, just bounces across pretty much the whole Welcome Center to find Lucy. Lucy is I mean, obviously this is very consensual. Lucy is very willing to give a hug. She opens up her arms. Jack goes and gives a little hug, and then he turns around with the biggest grin on his face, and then just like trots away. Like it was just like this
So fun.
happy accomplishment. So cute. And what good taste. I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
to have a crush on
Well, I got to
Lucy
play
Judkins.
peekaboo with little Sam yesterday because I was behind one of the tables.
Was he liking
and
that?
he saw me and he kind of tilted his head down. Well, I tilted my head down. He said, "I see you," and I said, "I see you," and I moved my head back and I went the other way. And he said, "I see you." I said, "I see you." So it was really sweet.
Sam is very social.
Well, speaking
And
of
I think pretty
parenting,
cute.
I think we should make some plugs about summer things coming
Oh,
up. We didn't
yeah.
talk about this before, but
This,
yeah.
this podcast is brought to you by First Baptist Arlington.
it is. I think Kinder Bible is full, if not close to full.
Close to full. I mean, as of yesterday's announcement.
Yes.
But Wild Camp,
Wow Camp Session 1 is full.
Yes.
Session 2 has limited space.
so sign up your kids.
Speaking of things that help, I mean, what a great church to raise children in.
Say it again.
What?
I'm already
I'm
made you do
just
that once
repeating
today.
myself. What a great
It
church
is.
to raise
It
children
is.
in.
Amen.
It is.
So if you have friends who are just looking for stuff to do this summer,
Always, right? Isn't that like
Bible
the
Wild
plight
Camp.
of a parent is finding meaningful things for your kids to do?
so bring them on.
Yeah.
It's a good way to just connect people with the life of church.
That's good. And we have, announced this at the second service yesterday that our summer clusters will start in July. So our women's in-home Bible studies that are around town, those will kick off the week after July 4th. So that'll come quicker than we think. But and then Pastor's Bible Study will start back up. So there is something for kids, but also if you're an adult trying to find your way,
Stuff happening.
there's stuff happening. Yeah. Don't check out for the summer. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. You did preach yesterday.
You know, I did.
You know, I'd never heard that before. I mean,
Yeah,
that was
I
a totally
did.
new concept yesterday. Really? I mean, yeah.
About flourishing?
A flourishing tree?
Yeah, is it
with
brand new
with
to you?
rootedness and a trunk?
I don't think I've ever read Psalm 1 before.
What?
I highly recommend it.
What inspiration came upon you? No, it's good. It's good. So let's talk about it.
Shows you how you can just revisit a text over and over and over.
You really can.
know, you just can.
One of the things that stood out to
I
me.
brought the tree with
You
me
did.
today. There it is.
I've got it.
I love that you brought Dallas Willard into it. I do love Dallas Willard. I think I've said it before and quoted him before.
Yep.
But you talked about his kind of, I don't know if I want to call it a theory of the self, but just what is a person? And so I wondered if you wanted to dive into that a little more because his theology around that is pretty robust.
So the
think
question
so.
is, what is a person?
What's a person?
What is a human?
Because before you can answer what's a Psalm 1 person, what's a
Wow.
person?
Wow.
Exactly.
Let's take it back.
Well, I think of course, I would give the Lord credit before Dallas because,
Yes.
you know, when the text says things like
Dallas would do
love
the
the
same.
Lord your
Dallas would
God
definitely
with
do
all
the
your
same.
heart, soul, and mind, why does it say that? Why does it just say love the Lord your God? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it could say, but it goes into more detail. And I think it's, as I said yesterday, to me, just watching human beings as I have for so long and being one myself, it's just, I've always been.
This is called a participant observer.
Yes, I've always noticed.
Apply what you learned, Luke. Apply
just
what you
how
learned.
complex we are, and how challenging it is sometimes to understand human beings and why they do the things that they do, what motivates them to do the things they do, how do they arrive at their decisions, and what is it about human beings that just separates us from the rest of all of creation. And you know, as I have watched just people all over the world, I've just seen so many things that are just inherent within our humanity, you know, regardless of what your station of life is. So there's that core connection we have, which I would attribute to the image of God. And I know in our study of flourishing, that's what Tyler Vanderwill from Harvard argues, that when he looks at this sense of awareness and this desire for purpose and this hope for meaning, he, as well as I, and a lot of others, connect that to the image of God in us. But that's only a part of the story, because how is that played out? And so when the text uses words like heart and mind and soul, well, that really causes me a little pause to try to figure that out, because you can't really separate all that out except for in a conversation, because it's all so intertwined. And you think about how people who have incredibly debilitating diseases in their bodies, and yet they're still present. They are still human beings. They still have the presence of mind to think and act, and it just lets you know there's more to us than our bodies. Our bodies are a part of us, obviously, and we're told in Romans to present our bodies as living sacrifices. So it's almost like it's this whole, this fully orbed embracing of the complexity of humanity in the Scripture, and we take all of that and love the Lord with it.
Yeah.
So that's what I love. And so Dallas Willard, he likes to talk about the heart. That's a really big thing to him because he's really focused on formation, spiritual formation.
Right.
As you know, that's just a big part of his understanding of what should be happening to all of us. In fact, he contends everybody's being spiritually
I
formed.
think he says everyone is being spiritually formed.
Yeah.
It's really just a question of into what.
That's right. Who's responsible for it?
This is good.
What are you being guided by or towards? But we're all being formed spiritually. I would agree with that. Just like I said, yesterday, we all have motivations. We all have this decision-making part of us, and so we're going to make these decisions. Well, how are they guided? And I think when the text uses mind, heart, and soul, that helps us think a little more holistically about who we are. And so yeah, I like the way Dallas Willard points it out. John Ortberg wrote a book about the soul after that. That's also been helpful. But numerous theologians throughout the centuries have written about this, trying to figure out what is this about us that makes us who we are. And the idea that we're aware, that we have this ability to make decisions, that these thoughts and feelings guide us, but there's something about us that's eternal. And so the fact that organizing principle, as Dallas Willard says, I think he's right about that. It's the soul that integrates us, which is why a part of our job, I would say, as ministers, is to help people find a way to find a path toward a healthy soul, because that affects everything. It affects your decision making, your heart, and also with the mind being renewed by truth, it all mixes together. And hopefully, it's on a path of being formed spiritually. And so,
Right.
Sunday morning, or as I was planning this series out, I know I'm going to be out in July, and I thought, okay, I want to kind of give my 2 cents worth on meaning and purpose, and I really think that that Psalm 1 helps communicate that. So does Dallas Willard, by the way. He uses Psalm 1 in Renovation of the Heart. I'm very proud of him for doing that. And he uses the word flourishing, which I found quite fascinating. It's interesting. I've never noticed that. I've read that book numerous times. And I went back and I was reading that chapter.
It's I think would recommend that book without reservations.
Yeah, Renovation of the Heart. It's really good.
Renovation of the Heart.
Yeah.
Dallas Willard.
But what he says is in the section where he's discussing Psalm 1, and again, I've never read it, but some of it, I've never thought about it, I guess, but it's because the word flourish is not a part of my vocabulary. It's just not a word that I use historically.
Yep.
So I didn't even notice it.
Used.
Right.
You use
now
it
I'm using
now
it.
you're all over it.
And so when I'm reading it, it's just funny to me. He talks about this is a flourishing person, and he kind of describes a flourishing person. And I was like, way to go, Dallas. You're a man ahead of your time. And but I do think that's who the Psalm 1 person is. I see it as a flourishing person. That word blessed, and there's different words for blessed in the Old Testament. This is not the normal word for blessed, in Psalm 1. And so it has this ashrei, it has this idea of a sense of progress, if you will, a sense of movement as a person. And it's funny how the text speaks of the person in singular, but it speaks about all the forces in the plural. So blessed is the one who stands in the presence of all these sinners. Or who doesn't walk with the sinners, rather, or stand with the mockers, or be seated with the scornful. Those are all plural nouns, but the blessed person is singular. So it's this idea that you've got to somehow figure this out for yourself, and you're going to swim upstream a lot with it. And so, captures so much.
The narrow way,
kind of like a narrow way to me. So yeah, isn't that funny? Kind of like the Jesus way is what I would say. I think Jesus read Psalm 1, and so.
Probably.
And so we have new people in the church, though. It's interesting. I had folks yesterday, never seen it before, never seen the Psalm 1 tree.
By my count, we had at least 10 new people in the church.
They're just
I visited
newer
with several
church
of them.
members.
Yeah.
And it was just the first time they'd ever even seen that.
Yeah.
And some of them not even knowing that Psalm 1 is inscribed on the walls of the church. Because it's not like something you just notice when you come in. You'd have to kind of be looking.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so it's really as I said Sunday, to me, this is just one sermon. It just has 3 parts to it. And so it'll take me 3 Sundays to unpack it. So, but I'm excited about it. But yeah, I do believe it paints a holistic portrait for us. But yeah, humanity, I look at human beings and watch them. We're just so complex. There's just so many different ways that human beings are motivated, and we're all so different when it comes to those kinds of things. And it's beautiful to me that God has somehow worked this to where there's just, it's like there's, you could talk about so much more about human beings. I mean, things like temperament, which I don't talk much about, but you think about how differently we're wired. Mm-hmm. And so our spiritual formation is connected to how we're wired, and so, and I think God has just made it so comprehensive for us because, I was being interviewed this last week by a pastor who's researching the rhythms of a senior pastor. Just asked numerous questions about that. Well, one of the questions had to do with how do I experience my own sense of spiritual formation? What does that mean to me, just personally?
Good question.
How do I do it?
Yeah, you want to let us know?
And as I told him, I'm an active person, and I tend, and I don't mean this to sound the wrong way because we're just all different, but I lean a little more toward intellectual stimulation. That's just kind of how I'm wired, or active stimulation. And so for me, I love to engage the Lord intellectually and engage spiritual truth intellectually and the Scripture that way. And that's part of what helps to shape me and form. That's just kind of my temperament. Not everybody has that temperament. It's not that I don't appreciate beauty, but I'm not so aesthetic that I have to have that. I don't have to take a walk in nature to experience God's presence. I'm not that contemplative. Sorry to disappoint many of you, but I'm just not. It's not. I'm not the kind of person who has an hour-long prayer time with God. I pray all day long. I'm in this constant conversation with God, and it's a very active kind of relationship that I have with Him. And so I've had to come to peace with that. When I was younger, I always felt guilty about it because I was told that, this is the way you have to do this. You have to be
Go into your prayer closet.
Yes,
and stay
if you're
there.
going to be a pastor, for sure.
Yeah.
Contemplative. And y'all, I would try it. And I got to where I finally, actually, to be honest, I know this is going to sound weird, but I finally took some of my journals from those days and just burned them in my barbecue grill because, I would be writing something down. And then all of a sudden I'd write over to the side of it, I need to call so-and-so today because if I don't, I'm going to forget it. And then I'd be writing, oh, Lord, how majestic is your name. I know at 2:00 today I've got to do this. So it's like I've got these, I'm trying to be Augustine and I'm Dennis the whole time. It's the weirdest thing. So one day I was looking at it thinking, when I die,
God didn't want you to
I
be
don't want anybody
Augustine.
reading this. I just burned it all. I was afraid somebody's going to read this and go, I thought this guy was holier than this.
No.
And
Just get rid
I'm
of
going
it.
to the Auburn game tonight and I'm really worried about this. And I'm making those notes in my journals. So,
Which I actually think is all okay if you're doing that in your journals at home.
but that's just
There's
how
room for all of
I just
that.
know how I'm wired. So temperament, which I didn't even mention Sunday morning, but I think it's helpful for people to help release them to their own way of doing this. And it just, to me, it just
your
is-
spiritual formation into the way of Jesus does not have to look exactly like your neighbors
No,
or
there's some
Dr.
elements.
Wiles.
There's some basic elements that I think everybody needs to have.
Pray.
Of course.
Yeah, but they're
Pray.
exactly. They're like
There's the
prayer,
scripture, of
Bible
course.
reading. Yeah.
Yes.
But how you do those
Obedience.
things,
Service. Yeah. All that.
how you go about those things.
I just
We
think we're all
did
different.
I think it was in Covenant Groups at Truett, a book called Sacred Pathways.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
remember Sacred Pathways?
I do remember that.
I don't remember all of it, but it basically had you read about and then take some kind of inventory on how do you commune with God and what are the ways that what is your sacred pathway in terms of where God meets you and how do you meet with Him in a spiritual formation way. And that was helpful, even to know that there are like 8 or 9 options were the ones that are more natural to me. I was like, I never would have thought of that. I don't meet God in a piece of art, for example. I'm bad at that, actually. So, but other people might, and that's helpful for me to even know that that's
Exactly.
a valid path for someone else to find God.
Like music. I love music. And I'm moved by music because I think just because I'm human, but I don't wake up every day thinking I don't even have a Spotify. If I want to listen to something, I will just go on YouTube and get it, or ask Cindy to get it for me. To be
It was
honest with
fascinating how many times N.T. Wright last week talked about symphonies.
Yes, he's very much into classical music,
Right,
and he
but he
sees
mentioned
the
it's-
rhythms of God's creation through it all.
Yeah, it's a spiritual endeavor
It
for him.
is for him. Yeah,
Where
and-
don't take me to a symphony.
Yeah. So I'm just not wired that way. But last week when I was in Nashville doing this memorial service for my nephew, I was in a crowd of people where music is their life, and it's their way of expressing, it's their way of grieving, it's their way of celebrating, it's their way of communicating. And I was actually taken by it. And I realized it was a little emotional for me because it was my nephew. But at the same time, I was caught up in the fact that, my goodness, this is actually how many of these people are able to communicate their true feelings and express their ideas and their thoughts, and they're doing it, and it means something to them. Because I was sitting there I was listening to these writers who talked about different songs they were writing, and I thought, so what's it like to make music? Because I have no idea. I can't, I don't, in my mind, I can't imagine that I'm going to write a song and I'm going to write the music to it so that you and I can sing the music to it. And so when I talked to Cindy about that, Cindy said, well, there are some people who hear it before they write it. And I'm like, okay, that's very odd. I can't imagine that. And so...
I can't confirm this, but I would imagine that's our Brock Snow.
I think you're right.
Probably that way.
I do. I think you're right.
Yes.
And there's something about that. Well, I was in a room full of people that's who they are. It was very powerful. But I know that's not my medium. I enjoy it. There's nothing against it. I love it, and I'm moved by it. I really am. But I don't think about it, and I don't need it to necessarily guide my time with the Lord, if that makes sense. So like when I'm out walking, if I'm by myself and Cindy's not with me, I'm either listening to most of the time I'm not listening to anything, to be honest with you. I'm usually talking to God and thinking through my life. But often I'm listening to either a sermon or a series of lectures on something that feeds me intellectually, that connects to me spiritually, which is how I'm wired. Which to me, it's an embracing. I'm loving the Lord with my mind, which is what I'm told to do, and that connects me to my heart, and my soul is wired that way, and so
there's a lot there.
Yeah,
Luke, your wheels are turning on that.
Yeah.
So,
There's just so much that I think we can do to engage with God. And hopefully, if you're listening to this, you've figured out some of those patterns that help you do that. So again, keep grounding yourself in the Word of God. Keep grounding yourself in Scripture. Pray, but recognize that prayer is this very big, expansive thing. And there's so many different ways to go about praying.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about that next Sunday, this whole idea of being transformed along the way, trying to highlight the different kinds of people that did follow Jesus, because they're very different kinds of people. And that's where the temperament and the personality and just that intersection of the will of God, the mind of God, with the kind of people He's created us to be. So I'm going to at least touch upon that this next Sunday.
That's great.
Well, we'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
There's a lot more, but I get the sense that we're going to hang out in this for 3 weeks. So
we are.
Let's
We got
we'll
time.
put a
Let's
pin
do
in
it.
it, and
Let's
we'll
do it.
talk about it next week. Thank y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Tell Me More podcast today. You can subscribe to this podcast on your app of choice, or you can visit us at fbca.org to find out more information about the podcast and our church. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.